Mary. I'm so happy to be doing this with you.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to meet you. In what ways did being queer allow you to live and be that straightness did not afford?
I was really lucky. I came out in 1974, and it was the second wave of the women's movement. I was in Washington, D.C., and I was part of a radical political community. I was working with a collective called Source Collective. There were 7 of us. We lived together. We worked together. On our walls were posters of Che Guevara and the farm workers and lesbians on horseback. We, one person every week would do all the cooking and the cleaning and the facilitating. And it was the community was very supportive. So then came into the collective, Jayne and her boyfriend, Pete. And she was a musician. And she taught me about changing the pronouns of folk songs from he to she. And my world changed. Because then at that time, it's hard to remember, everything was he.
Yeah.
Everything was he. And you just were supposed to accept that. And I did. I went home to my folks who lived in the suburbs one day, and I said, I'm a lesbian and a communist, and you have to stop eating white bread. And I couldn't believe they didn't just go, right on, Penny. I mean, they were good Jewish liberals, but that was a stretch for them. And being, a lesbian, it was so celebratory. I mean, it was high drama. It was high drama.
Always.
Always.
That has not changed.
If it's okay, first question I have, if I'm correct, you identify as transmasculine. So I'd love to know what you want me to know about that.
Transmasculinity for me it's constantly in flux. And it is really this unbelievably fragile balance between how can I perform my gender in a way that feels authentic and good and right, and also how do I make sure I'm not reenacting the systems of violence that I grew up experiencing as a girl and that I still experience as a trans person. And so this idea of transmasc, as far as needing an identity goes, that works for me.
Thank you for that. That was powerful. I identify as a woman, as queer, as lesbian, and have certainly internalized patriarchy. I mean, part of my battle is not giving into that. But so I love that you framed it that way. I haven't heard it framed that way. And it's so empowering and beautiful.
Thank you.
So, and challenging. I mean, I get what you're saying about the fragility.
When and what was the moment where you realized you were a lesbian?
I was reading a book by Marge Piercy.
Of course.
Small Changes.
I love Small Changes.
One of the characters, the friends of the character are saying, oh, come be part of the Gay Liberation March.
Oh my God.
And the character goes, is kind of freaked out and goes, oh, I don't want to do that. Then the character goes, oh my God, what if I'm gay? And I read that and I went, oh my God, what if I'm gay?
I actually had the exact same experience.
You did?
Yeah. I think I was 11, and there was this book called Ask the Passengers. It was just this kind of YA novel, but about this girl who's gay. And I remember in the book, they're these teenagers, and they live in this small town, and they sneak out to a gay bar, and then, they're going a couple of times. And I remember being 12 or 13 years old and thinking to myself, all I want is to be able to go out dancing. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to go out dancing and just feel like I can dance. I grew up around an older generation of Jewish queers. And it's funny, I felt really alone and I felt really isolated, and I didn't tell anybody for 2 years. And I was at this modern Orthodox Jewish day school, and I didn't come out there. I was really paranoid, and I was so scared that I wouldn't even write in my diary that I was gay.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of a tangent, thinking about identity and queerness and how we're supposed to be committed to these identities. My generation is that we're always changing. It's you're a lesbian one day, you're this the next, you're not. And I remember being frustrated at first by that because it felt like this indecisiveness. But then as I came into transness, I was oh, this is actually just a commitment to fluidity and a commitment to change and a commitment to transformation, that we only have access to this because our elders built the foundation.
Thank you.
And so it feels very much like a legacy, even if it wasn't an intended legacy. Y'all are the reason we exist. We need to have grace for our elders. That's one thing that gives me a lot of pain about my generation, is that we're so quick to judge and we're so quick to cancel. And we're never gonna heal if we're not having painful conversations.
We open the door around more sexual freedom in general, but certainly coming out as lesbian or gay. And then you all have taken that and run with it, and that the word for it is fluidity. The queer term is just a much more fluid term and less about who you sleep with than, how you identify.
When you were in the gay liberation movement, was there a vision for a queer future? And if so, how different or similar is it to the one that we're seeing today?
We went to socialist feminist conferences, and what I really learned and got attached to was the idea of queer women of color leading the revolution, whatever that was going to look like, and that I wanted to be able to follow and support in the best way I could. I mean, I never could have imagined what's going on today around the incredible backlash that Trump certainly led, but it's way bigger than that. Around the anti-trans legislation that just breaks my heart. So that's not the future we envisioned at all.
Whenever I talk about this, my dad is like, oh, God, because he loves me and he wants me to be okay. And I think it scares him and pains him to have his 22-year-old child say that they don't have hope. Having hope feels like putting eggs in a basket that doesn't exist. Hope is fleeting, and it is dependent on momentum, and it is dependent on being able to see things. I believe in faith, and that comes from being religious.
And how does faith connect to your Jewishness? Yeah. Does it?
Yes. My faith is my
And your transness.
Yes. We have these identities that are seemingly distinct, but they're not. And my transness is my Jewishness and vice versa.
I often say that it was my lesbianness that led me to my Jewishness in an emotional way.
Yeah.
For me, I think it sounds like a pretty different growing up than you. I grew up in a white, middle-class Protestant suburb of Northern Virginia. The story is I remember as a child people looking at me and saying, gee, Penny, you don't look Jewish. And I would shrug my shoulders and smile and say, thank you. That's what I thought I was supposed to say.
Wow.
In 1982, in Oakland, I walked into this bookstore, and there was a book called Nice Jewish Girls, a Lesbian Anthology. And I thought I died and went to heaven. And I read it. And it was stories of all these different Jewish lesbians, but very diverse, around Jewish practice, lesbian ethnicity, relationship, and I went, oh my God, these are my people.
There are certain Jewish spaces where my queerness is so totally accepted. And there are certain Jewish spaces where, I walk into a synagogue and it's men on one side and women on the other, and I don't know what to do.
Wow.
But it's that feeling of what if. Even though nothing is going to happen when you're trans, when you're queer, you always live with that hypervigilance.
I'm so sorry that our society is where it is, that you have to be hypervigilant and walk into a synagogue, which is clearly important to you given your background, and feel fear. From a very hopefully open-hearted place, I would really like to know what your generation of queer people wants my generation of queer folks to know about your generation, and how can we support you?
Okay, this is so funny, but there's this meme. Gen Z can't order French fries from a McDonald's, but will beat up a cop. This kind of insane contrast between being very, socially anxious, experiencing a lot of mental illness, and then also being ferocious in the best way. But I think that people my age are in a lot of pain and really scared. And that can lead us to be reactionary. We're in our own kind of survival mode. We don't always know how to ask for the tenderness that we need.
Oh.
And then for just generally older lesbian spaces, the trans piece can be hard. I never know when I'm interacting with an older lesbian how they're going to receive me. I get a lot of, why can't you just be a dyke? Why can't you just, I don't understand why you're like this, and I know that rhetoric because you're not doing it,
But I'm sorry. And I've made my share of mistakes.
But that's the learning process.
That's very helpful for me to hear when I sometimes feel there's folks in the younger generations, queer and trans folks, who kind of want to erase lesbians.
Yeah.
And that's painful.
Yes.
And what I want to hold is a both and.
Yes.
we really need and want you all. And not that you're all one way or we were all one way, but we can hold all of it. I've been thinking about connection, not perfection.
Yeah, and coalition building, not identity politics.
Yeah.
Because my generation is very ferocious and is very politicized and is very active. I don't know how much people realize, like, you know, we're still kids and we were like activists when we were kids.
Yeah.
And it messes with you. And I think a lot of us are just like scared.
I feel like I just want to take you in my arms and thank you and hold you in comfort and
thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was amazing. Yes, can I get a hug?
That was great.
Thank you.